Hey folks, we're here for a quickie edition of Israel Explained. I talked already about Biden's speech yesterday at length, so I'm not going to repeat what I said about Biden and the Israeli plan, but I do want to address the domestic political ramifications of the speech briefly, because there's a lot of things happening and there's a lot of questions. So first of all, one of the big questions everyone keeps asking is how is this an Israeli offer, especially since Netanyahu's office has had some reservations about it and stated very clearly that in what they call the real offer, Israel reserves the right to continue fighting the war. Um, so the explanation for that has a lot to do with the intricacies of Israeli politics, which is one of the reasons I wanted to do this episode. Let's go back a few days to the day when this decision was made by the Israeli cabinet. So keep a couple of things in mind. First, there are two cabinets in Israel. One is the small war cabinet, which is populated by Gantz, Eisenkot, Gallant, Berry, and Dermer. And then you have the large cabinet, which is much wider, of course, by definition, and it has Ben-Gvir, Smotrich, Miri Regev, and a lot of other people who are more to the right. The war cabinet, not coincidentally, because Netanyahu did want it that way, and so did Gantz, is more moderate. So on that day, we're talking about May 29th, that was the day the movie of the female observers from Nahal Oz who were kidnapped by Hamas came out. Emotions were very high. There was a feeling in Israel that getting back the hostages was the most important thing. The army, Mossad, and Shabak had all recommended going further towards a deal with Hamas. Netanyahu was hesitant to do so, arguably because of questions of national security, arguably because of domestic political considerations. Either way, he was hesitant to do so. But when he lost the support of Ron Dermer, who was his closest ally in the small cabinet, there was a consensus within that cabinet, aside from Netanyahu, that a more far-reaching deal should be approved. Netanyahu reluctantly agreed to it. However, to avoid political embarrassment, most likely, but also for what he claims are national security reasons, he placed it under military censorship. That was delivered to Hamas. Before Hamas had a chance to even look at it properly, they said that as long as the operation in Rafah continues, they're not going to talk about anything. That's one of the main reasons that Biden decided to release the details of the offer when he did, because Hamas were showing signs of not being willing to. He wanted to put Hamas on the spot, Qatar on the spot, and Egypt on the spot, and kind of force them into the deal. But that's not the only reason Biden did it when he did it. He was also looking at the Israeli political map. So just a few days before that, Benny Gantz, had announced that he's leaving on June 8th, unless the Israeli government comes up with a long-term strategy plan. Netanyahu's basically rejected that, and therefore Gantz was going to leave. Some people in his party were even saying that they might leave early. There were reports coming, as I've mentioned in previous episodes, that Ben-Gvir and Smotrich were going to be put into the cabinet. As we know, if they're in the small cabinet will never again agree to a hostage deal. So what Biden was trying to do was they were trying to lock Israel into that offer that he thought was a good one in order to get a deal, and also pressure Hamas into doing so. But also by giving a deal that Israel may agree to, since after all it's an Israeli deal, as Biden has said several times, he could give Gantz a pretext, a good, strong pretext to remain in the government and keep the government more moderate. Now, Biden made the speech on Shabbat, an hour and a half into Shabbat in Israeli time, and that meant that Ben-Gvir and Smotrich could not respond. I've seen some officials in the Biden administration say that that's a coincidence. I don't know if it is a coincidence, but either way, that worked out quite well, because for 24 hours, Ben-Gvir and Smotrich could not respond. And that meant that they could not shape the narrative immediately. Of course, once Shabbat ended and they could respond, they immediately responded the way you would expect them to respond. Both of them said that if this deal goes through, they will leave the government. Now, that would not collapse the government because Gantz would theoretically remain, and Yair Lapid, who's currently in the opposition, has said that he's going to give security votes to this deal. He said that he will keep the government alive at least for long enough to pass the deal. So what Netanyahu has the chance to do now is to do something that could be seen by many as for the good of the country. I would certainly see it that way. Pass this deal with Gantz and Lapid supporting it, and then fall elections. Of course, the chances of him doing that are not very high. The reason that Netanyahu started backing away from the offer that he made as soon as he made it is because he was concerned about Ben-Gvir and Smotrich's reactions. Their reactions are as sharp as they could be. No, they did not personally attack Netanyahu or anything. They said, um, if you accept this, if you move ahead with this, we will be leaving the government. So that's not an indication in any way that this is not an Israeli offer. That's an indication that they weren't part of the small cabinet that made the offer. They were aware of the offer, but Netanyahu had given them guarantees secretly that Israel would be able to continue the war if it agreed to this deal. And indeed, that's how they've been spinning it in the tweets from the prime minister's office, saying, we reserve the right in this deal to continue the war. So one of the reasons Israel agreed to this is because in the phrasing there's some ambiguity. What Israel is hoping is that eventually Hamas will violate the deal. The deal will allow them to continue the attack after that violation. So it's hoping to get back the civilians, maybe move the operation to the north, to get back the hostages, maybe move the operation to the north and continue with Hamas at a better date. But now Biden has locked him into basically two options. One, to continue with this deal, to have a more moderate government with Gallant and possibly Lapid from the outside backing it, have American approval, move towards Saudi normalization, and all that. On the other hand, he could have Gantz leave almost immediately because he says no to the deal that he has already approved on May 29th. He could say no, then be in a government where he's completely dependent on Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, lose American goodwill, be blamed by the entire world for torpedoing a ceasefire. That would, of course, accelerate the process at the ICC, at the ICJ, lead to sanctions. And I think Biden is also strengthened by a poll I just saw that 51% of American Jews support the fact that Biden was slowing down arms for the Rafah offensive. It seems that most American Jews are okay with Biden's policy, and that strengthens that as well. So he's placed Netanyahu in a corner and cleverly used his own decision, which he entered into very reluctantly, against him. So that's what's happening now. Whether Gantz leaves or stays will depend completely on how Netanyahu responds to this. We all know Netanyahu, the chances of him accepting, moving ahead with his own deal, once Ben-Gvir and Smotrich have said that they're going to leave, and leaving himself at the mercy of Gantz and Lapid is very small. Of course, he could move ahead with them, finish the deal, finish the war, save the hostages, move to elections, but that doesn't sound like something that he would do. The problem with the trap that Netanyahu has gone into, that Biden has set for him, is that Netanyahu is going to walk right into that trap knowingly. He doesn't seem to have the wherewithal and the bravery to deal with getting Ben-Gvir and Smotrich out of the coalition with losing the extreme right-wing part of his coalition. So, to summarize, this is an Israeli deal, arrived on May 29th by the small cabinet, but that small cabinet with Gantz and Eisenkot is about to change, and so Biden's been trying to lock them in to their own offer. Okay, I just put out a video yesterday, so I only have one question. It's from John Price. If the war ends now, what do you think will be the ICC, ICJ verdicts in the coming years? Okay, so I think that if the war ends now, there's a good chance there's not going to be a genocide decision at the ICJ, and that the ICC will cancel the arrest warrants, or certainly won't expand the arrest warrants to other people. And I think it could get the ICC warrants canceled if it starts investigating its own conduct in this war. So it definitely raises the chances of Israel not falling into those international tribunal pitfalls. Are the prisoners offered more than 2,000? From what I'm seeing, it's over 700. And that's a pretty good number for Israel compared to other things that I've seen. Would more than that ignite the West Bank too much? I mean, it depends more on the quality of the prisoners released rather than the quantity. We know that if you release heavy hitters, they tend to return to terrorism, and will definitely have a bad effect on the West Bank. On the other hand, the war continuing may also have a bad effect on the West Bank. It's already spreading to there. So it's a little bit of a question there of what's worse. Neither option is good. What's your opinion on the Saudi and Lebanese offers? I'm not sure what those are, sorry. Will KSA be intransigent on East Jerusalem as a Palestinian capital? So regarding the Saudi um, element of the initiative, the Saudis aren't really that interested in the Palestinian state or the Palestinian cause. I think we all know that. They need to protect their flank. They need to protect themselves against domestic opinion and against the opinion of other Arab states. So what they want to do is they want to get progress from Israel towards a Palestinian state. The idea that Israel will now say it's dividing Jerusalem is unthinkable for any Israeli government in the near future. So I don't think they would insist on that. I think what they want is for Israel to at least put a fig leaf on this process and say, we are moving towards a Palestinian state. Not that different from what Israel did in 1979 with the Egyptians, which ended up going nowhere. But then Begin was willing to do it very reluctantly, and now they're not. So I don't think there's going to be any intransigence on Jerusalem anytime soon. Maybe eventually it would go there. Okay, so I hope this update was helpful to you. If you like what I do here, consider supporting me on Patreon at Shael Media. I plan to today also record a uh, episode of my History of the Land of Israel podcast on the court of King David. So thank you very much, and I will see you very soon.